Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim. Hope you are great. So, came across this video where black people, white people are all talking about the white women that voted for this administration and what white women have been doing recently. Now, let me tell you something. I feel like a majority of the things they do are kind of calculated because they think that some things are beneficial to my people. So for that reason, they try as much as they can to block it so that you will not benefit from it, not knowing that they are the ones benefiting more from it. Because tell me how they wake up each time to call my people welfare kings and queens. But then when you look around, who the real welfare kings and queens are, it is them. Ignorant, their own ignorance is so bliss that they don't even want to learn. Because how do you talk on something you are not very sure of? Now, let me tell you this. If you remember, there so many white women have spoken on this EBT. Some of them have lost their jobs. Some of them are still losing their job. That is how ignorant is. Because to them, they think I am the welfare king or queen, right? Not knowing that they are. So what they are doing is to frustrate you from not getting that thing. That is, like, for example, EBT, not knowing that they are frustrating themselves. Tell me how majority of these people, they have friends and loved ones that are on EBT, but still they come out because they feel that we are the ones that is benefiting more. That is wickedness. Let's get into this video.
If you can convince the poorest white man that he's better than black man just based on the color of his skin, he'll give you his money. And better yet, he won't even notice when you pick in his pocket. If we can afford to fund welfare in foreign countries, then Americans should feel entitled to the government covering basic needs. If we can fund welfare in foreign countries, then Americans should feel entitled to the government covering our basic needs. Free healthcare, free education in Israel, funded by the U.S. government. Cut all of our soybean and beef exports and gave it to Argentina. They're going to eat good out there. They're eating good in Israel. 42 million Americans on the brink of starvation. But yet, y'all want to keep talking about pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. If they can get all of these free benefits of a society, if they can live in a socialist society where they don't have to worry about food, healthcare, or education funded by our dollar, then why is it a problem for it to happen in America? Well, the problem is you don't want black people to benefit from that. So you'll chop your own legs out from underneath you just so black people won't have anything. And you ain't got shit. So the greater 60% of white people will watch the lower 40% of white people starve, if that means a quarter of black people starve with them. Ignorance. Now, the farmers, the soybean farmers, the beef farmers, huh? We're gonna see y'all in some food in some food pantries, ain't we? Wait, make sure you wear that MAGA hat to the food pantry. Because what's gonna happen when you can't operate the farm no more because you ain't got nowhere to sell the soybean? Because Trump took that and sent that over down south, sent that far south. When you can't get off this cattle, they're gonna send that far south. Or you're just gonna have to start busting that shit down with your neighbors. No profit. Or minimal profit. This your king.
In addition to being a bad bee with a law degree, I'm a bad bee with a sociology degree and an anthropology minor. I'm a lawyer, I'm a legal consultant, I'm an outspoken women's advocate, right? I'm also a lover of history, in particular, American history, because if you don't understand where you're coming from, and if you don't understand the mistakes of the past, you are doomed to repeat them. And looking at American history, I really love to examine the way that enslaved Black people in America in particular freed themselves from slavery, right? And I read through the historical accounts and narratives of enslaved Black people who fled to the North. So they fled to northern free states, or they fled to, as far as Canada, and some even fled south to Mexico and Central America to escape the bondage of slavery, right? Because they understood inherently where the white patriarchal supremacist society had them in terms of hierarchy and in terms of social standing, right? I also examine women's suffrage, particularly white women's suffrage in American history. And I've made the connection before that white women's suffrage began picking up steam around the same time that widespread calls for abolition became mainstream, right? Thinking 1830s, 1840s, and onwards, right? And again, I'm generalizing for the sake of this observation. So after making these connections, after making these observations, after reading these historical accounts and narratives, my question then becomes, why weren't white women who were subject to the same patriarchal oppression that enslaved Black people were subject to, why weren't white women running north to freedom with enslaved Black people? Why didn't white women hitch their wagon to enslaved Black people and take up their cause with them? Because after all, white women were being oppressed by the same white men, right? White women were being oppressed under the bondage and the yoke of patriarchal supremacy by virtue of their gender, where even though they were white, they were still women, right? So why didn't white women go take up cause with enslaved Black people and say, let's just go and do this together. Let me hitch my wagon to yours and let's go be free together in the land of the free, somewhere in far away from this white patriarchal man oppression. Why didn't white women do that? I know the answer, and you know the answer too. The answer is the same reason why white women today vote for Donald Trump and vote for politicians like him, even when those politicians are woman-hating men who are extremely sexist, bigoted, misogynistic, and patriarchal in their legislation, and they actively enact policies that harm all women, including white women. It's the same reason why today poor white people take up league with politicians like Donald Trump rather than hitching their wagons to the social justice movements of other minorities and other poor people as well. And instead vote for politicians like Donald Trump, who are billionaires, not just by virtue of being billionaires, but they're born into generational wealth. They wouldn't even wipe their ass with the flannel shirts that you buy at Walmart. Yeah, it's the same reason. What most white people understand and what they abide by is ultimately the fact that white supremacy takes precedence over all other matters. Maintaining supremacy of the white race, maintaining supremacy of whiteness above all else matters more than anything, matters more than any issues of class solidarity, matters more than any advancements towards gender-related improvements in legislation and advocacy. White supremacy first and foremost, everything else falls behind. Listen also to the white Trump supporters who are now saying things like, I regret my vote for Donald Trump. Listen to what they're saying and listen just as closely to what they're not saying, because they're not saying, I should have voted for Kamala Harris instead. They're not saying, I regret voting for Donald Trump. I should have voted for the Harris-Walz ticket instead. They're not saying that. The only reason why they're publicly saying they regret voting for Donald Trump is because Donald Trump's policies are harming them directly. They were banking on Donald Trump's policies only harming people whom they hate. But now that those policies are harming them, now they're in this quandary. They're battling with themselves where they have to ask themselves, is white supremacy really what I want to focus on? Is this really going to take precedence and, be above my own well-being and be above my health and be above my safety as well? They're basically having an identity crisis. Living under Trump Volume 2. That's all that this is. They're having an identity crisis. And let them have their identity crisis in peace. Go in peace. Be at peace. Because the rest of us who voted for that lady, aka Vice President Kamala Harris, we were under no illusion of exactly what would happen under Trump Volume 2, because we have the DNA stored in our cells of basically cellular memory of what our enslaved ancestors lived under. We also didn't buy into that stupid-ass, dumbass rhetoric from the internet activists and the armchair revolutionaries, as I call them, who said that, voting for the lesser evil isn't good anyway, and we shouldn't have to abide by a system. Listen to me. We are Black people. We are descendants of enslaved people. We have always had to choose between one evil and one lesser evil anyway. That's quite literally the entire, that makes up the entirety of our history here in the Americas. Here in America, here in Latin America, the Caribbean, Central America, South America. We've always had to choose between one evil and one lesser evil anyway. We've had to be very pragmatic about our decisions and our choices anyway. So that argument always fell flat on people who think realistically. But back to what I was saying, please understand and accept that for white people, maintaining white supremacy takes precedence even over their own lives, even over their own safety, their own well-being. Doesn't matter. It takes precedence. This is why you did not see poor white people get up and partake in rebellions en masse throughout the history of slavery in the United States, despite the fact that poor white people were too poor to enjoy any of the fruits of slave-holding systems and economies here in America. That's why. Because at the end of the day, even though they were poor, they were still white. And as a result of that, that meant that any other person who was not white was beneath them by default. One of the things that I truly honestly despise about white supremacy and white supremacist institutions and societies like America is that white supremacy gives all white people a sense of credibility. It gives them credence and it gives them identity, right? Whether they are white and poor, which is most white people, let's be clear, there are only like 5 or 6 well-known, wealthy white families. The rest of you are not part of the 1%, and quite frankly, are probably not even part of the 100%. If we're keeping it a buck, you have to work for a living, and then when you retire, you have to rely on Social Security and Medicare so you don't die slowly, agonizingly, and painfully. But that's another discussion, right? So whether a white person is poor, whether they're disabled, whether they're LGBTQ+, whether they have brown hair, whether they have blonde hair, they're still white, and their whiteness alone, because of centuries of oppression, gives them automatic credibility. It's an automatic in club that they're all a part of. It's an open secret. It's a silent acknowledgement of identity amongst themselves. This is why so many of our Caucasian brothers and sisters were so adamant and so excited in the wake of Kamala Harris being the Democratic presidential nominee, and we're going to all those rallies and we had all these social media hashtags and trends and everything like that. The silent agreement among most white people was that, yeah, we're gonna smile and ooh, yeah, we're so excited, yeah, but when we get in that voting booth, we need to lock in. Okay, because what white people won't openly admit is that in their minds, answering to a white fascist dictator like Trump is just a small price to pay for answering to someone who is in power, who is still white. At the end of the day, losing their jobs, losing their health care, losing their social safety net, losing their footing, losing all their grounding, losing their families, their homes, their ability to eat, etc. Those are all just small prices to pay, because most white people are quite content being oppressed if they're being oppressed by another white person. And if you don't believe me, look to 2 sources. One, the data from the exit polls breaking down who voted for Trump by race and by gender. And 2, again, the same data from the exit polls looking at the number of college-educated white women who voted for Trump. College-educated white women who, by and large, pursue liberal arts and social science degrees, where they spend 4 years minimum talking about oppressive systems and institutions. So they should really know better. Not my laundry buzzer going off while I'm talking. Anyway, that's what I truly hate about white supremacy. It's an automatic in club, and everyone else is left out of it. That's why we don't celebrate White History Month or what have you, is because whiteness is based on what you're not, as opposed to just a celebration of culture and traditions and survival in the face of certain autocratic regimes or the face of enslavement or Jim Crow laws or whatever. It's like an automatic in club for them. It's a silent agreement when they're in rooms with one another. It doesn't matter what they say they vote for, what platforms they publicly say that they support. When they get in that anonymous private voting booth, all that shit goes out the fucking window. Systemic institutionalized white supremacy is the sole reason why a country like America is simultaneously the wealthiest country in the world and simultaneously does not have any federal widespread social safety nets for its citizens, and the few social safety nets that are available, called entitlements, that we have to wait until old age to receive, are on the chopping block every single time a Republican comes into power. That is why we have countries who are communist countries, countries that are socialist, countries that don't touch America's GDP or military power or might, and yet their citizens have better qualities of life than America does. White supremacy is the reason why that is. White people who survived the first Trump administration looked around and said, my suffering is a-okay with me if black people are suffering too, if brown people and non-black people of color and immigrants are suffering too, right? Watching all those people being deported and having their heads shaved and being publicly dehumanized and sent off to God knows where to probably never be seen again, while white people are here sitting here wondering how they're going to pay their bills now that the government agency they worked for no longer exists, and the Medicare and the Social Security they live off of will soon no longer exist. That is a-okay with them. They will walk right into the gulag. They will walk right into the human concentration camps voluntarily, willingly, might I add, happily, if it means that the person running the concentration camp is another white person. They're okay with being oppressed. History has shown us this. The fact that there are still monarchies in European countries tells us this. Data from exit polls tells us this. It is just a small price to pay. That's why we can't get through to them with messaging or with statistics or with facts or with logical arguments. Nothing will get through to them because they don't want to be gotten through to. That's just it. So leave them. Leave them to suffer. And quite frankly, I'm beginning to agree with the Democrats and their kind of hands-off approach, because this cycle happens every single time, right? Republicans come in, slash funding to every fucking thing that's not war or business related, increase taxes on everyone except billionaires, and then the economy is in shite. Everything is a fucking mess. People become tired and elect a Democrat. A Democrat comes in, fixes the problem, and then institutes public policy that would positively impact everyone, including people who are not white, and put not white people in power. The same white people who are suffering under the Republican president now turn on the Democratic leadership, vote in another Republican, and then demand that Democrats turn around and save them. Like, lather, rinse, repeat is literally what that cycle is. So I agree with the Democrats. Hands off. Give the people exactly what they want. After all, who are we to argue with the will of tens of millions of Americans? At this stage, let America get exactly what America wants. That's all we can do. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I think the biggest misconception about white women is that they are allies to women by default. They're not allies to women by default. A lot of white women's allyship is not to women. It's to whiteness and it's to power, which connects them very directly to the white men in power. And they have a unique relationship with allyship because they can pick and choose according to their interests and what privileges they want to keep versus lose. And you need to understand that for a lot of white women, voting for Kamala Harris would have included loss of privilege, because just like a lot of white men, they have unearned guardrails in their life and privilege in their life. For a lot of white women, voting for Kamala would have meant giving up some of those things and having to be an actual ally to women. They would have had to examine things about themselves that are not pretty to look at. They would have had to look at somebody in power that doesn't really look like them. Because again, a lot of them are allies more so to whiteness and American culture and power in general. For them, that provides a lot of benefits. White women have the option of removing themselves from the women category, right? They can vote according to all sorts of different interests. A lot of times they mistakenly believe that a man has got their back. If they just vote the same way as him, if they sort of approximate, right, themselves in allyship to the same things that men are allied and in proximity to, they think they will get all the same benefits and protections, which is never, ever, 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 ever true. But they think so anyway. They vote against their own interests and the interests of other women. They think that when it comes to them, they're going to be an exception. And that's only true for the rich people. As a regular woman, that's only true for you while you are young and pretty and you don't have 5 children hanging off of you so much that you're neglecting your husband and you're neglecting your wifely duties, at which point he will divorce you. That's when white women turn into women, right? That's when their allyship, does a 180. And now the men are the enemy, and it's women need to support women, and who's going to watch my kids, and who's going to do this. Yeah, so white women really think they can take themselves out of the women category. And to be fair, they can. It's just that when life kicks them back into that category, they always regret it. They always go back on their word. A lot of these white women that have voted, they're either married still and they're aligning themselves with men instead of women. When other women criticize them for that, it's like, well, aren't I a woman too? And it's like, no, not exactly. White women have always benefited from aligning themselves with men, especially in America, because there have always been minorities in America to absorb the burden that white women would have otherwise had to carry for men. And what I'm specifically referring to is something that I said in a TikTok or two before Black women rightfully called me out. But I used to say this thing, women couldn't work, like men took away our right to work. And Black women were like, we worked the whole time. We always have worked. That's very, very true. Just so you know, that's what white women are trying to avoid. They're trying to avoid that path, because that is the path of most resistance and most oppression. White women are so close, right, to the tippy top. So they're constantly watching the white men just skating on by in life on that path of least resistance. And they're running and running and running to try to keep up with the men and be, let me jump on, let me jump on. And the white men are like, yeah, later, next time. Keep voting for us and we'll definitely, just as long as you keep voting for Republicans. The dream for a lot of white people is just to benefit off of the labor of others. That's why white women don't care. That's why they vote for whatever benefits them. They don't vote with other women. They vote for themselves. They vote to approximate themselves to the source of power, which is a white man, and historically has been a white man. And the way things are going, it's going to be a white man for another 4 years now. Because again, white women get to pick and choose what their allyship is to. They get to choose whom they align themselves with. That's why they always play the woman card. But just so you know, to them, it's not about being a woman, and it's not about supporting women. It's about supporting the status quo so that they don't lose any of the privileges that they currently like having. They don't want to align themselves with all women because that would mean they drop down. Do you see what I'm saying? I hope that helps.
This is for the white ladies who voted for this. I'm not going to yell at you. Just hold on for a second. First of all, I just want to chat a little bit about some things that I've definitely heard people say many times, which is like, so-and-so voted for this, but I know they're not a bad person. So let's break that down a little bit. What is a bad person? I think that, we're used to in movies, like bad versus good versus evil. You can be a good mother, a good friend, and still be voting for systems of oppression that are hurting people. But I think the important thing to remember is that good people can make bad decisions. So anyway, if you voted for this and you're still like super duper on board, yikes, and I don't really know what to say. But if you're kind of starting to wake up to what's going on and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I voted for this and maybe I was wrong. First of all, good job. It is hard to change your mind, especially as an adult, and it takes an ego check. That's why people don't do it a lot, right? Path of least resistance is the easiest thing. And I guess I would challenge you to think about all of the Americans right now who are actively being hurt by this. And they don't have a choice whether or not they want to pay attention. They don't have a choice whether or not they want to choose to teach their children about racism, because racism is very, very real for them in their everyday lives. We have the luxury, if we want, to just kind of turn a blind eye and say, I'm busy, I don't want to deal with that. I would really challenge you to start having those conversations with your friends. It's scary. I know it's scary to say, maybe I was wrong. It's scary to say, oh, I did this, but now I kind of feel weird about it. But we can do it. Be strong. Because I really, truly think that right now, those kinds of conversations are what can shift the needle and what can really, really help the people around us. And you kind of have to ask yourself, what am I willing to sacrifice? Am I willing to sacrifice a little bit of discomfort? Because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to have these conversations. But our comfort is a privilege that we have, and not everyone has that privilege. So please step out of that comfort zone, be brave, have these tough conversations, and maybe the next time around, we can all vote a little differently.
This is all I got from this video. Excuse me. Each time I see everything going on, and for some couple of like a week now, or since last month till now, I mean, like EBT has been everywhere and all of that because some people lost, like some people cannot get food, right? After the court, the judge telling Trump to pay, still he has not done anything to today. And I have seen several videos from white women. I cannot count how many videos that I have seen. And still, I am seeing more videos from them, most especially white women, right? I don't want to, especially white women. The kind of videos that I have seen, I don't know how to explain how people became this wicked all of a sudden. In a world where people needs kind people, that also that tells me a whole lot, right? Because seeing all this going on, and some of them are saying that they are like, that it's not okay for people to go, even people that I know, that there are some people are way better than, but because they also want to show you how superior they are, all of them wants to come out and make mockery of people that look like me. This is like, I am just giving an example till I get into the main video, right? Let's get it. Some of them, their cousins or people that are close to them are benefiting from this. That is to tell you how wickedness can, like, there are some people you can never ever remove wickedness from their gene. People they actually know are on this, right? But they still come out to tell you why it's not okay for people to receive SNAP benefits. Because in their own heart, they have already been, believed that my own people are the ones benefiting more from EBT without knowing their people are the ones benefiting. Just tell a white man or a white woman that he is better than people that look like me. That is the end of the story. Watch you pick his or her pocket and go scot-free. Why? Because you are poor. That's why most times you see them, some organizations we open up, maybe like help a child in Africa, right? Your $1 can go a long way. Your $10 can go a long way. And you see people, and it's actually their own people that always open that. And then they end up donating money because they have to help people in Africa that needs help, they need their help. When there are also people in United States of America that need their help. But no, Africa is because they are dying of hunger. Somebody will scam them their money and take away the money. Why? Because you think people in Africa, they don't have homes, right? So let's give them food. Let's let them eat. They are starving. They are not in good health. When your neighbors, see guys, when your neighbors are asking for food, or you know that they are going hungry, or you know that they are poor, you will rather probably go and buy a dog or give that to street dogs or a shelter and all that. Why? Because kindness is very far away from you people. From the look of things, this election that happened, you and I saw what happened. How they decided that they will vote against their own interests. Majority of, especially poor white people, as at today, they are suffering because I am seeing videos. They are asking how are they going to survive? Because the fact that these people to date do not understand that they are the one, the more of them are the ones on SNAP benefit. See, SNAP benefit was actually designed with white women in mind, or white people in mind. How do I explain that to you? That it was not designed with my people in mind. So how all of a sudden my people are the ones benefiting more when how many percent of you are white in the United States? So how come black people that are a fraction, how many this thing percent? How come all of a sudden they are the ones benefiting? And let me tell you this, black people, everything they are doing is to make sure that they frustrate you, because to them, you are the one benefiting from all of it. That's why DEI became drowned. Affirmative action drown. Why? Because they do not believe that some certain things are actually designed for them. They feel like they are the best, they are the ones getting everything. I don't know how to explain, but they are the ones at the top, not knowing that the top that they are at the one at the top when it comes to all this DEI, SNAP benefit, affirmative action. If you have looked around, they have rendered so many things that has been helping them. They have rendered it useless. Why? Because they made them believe that they are not the ones benefiting more from it. That people that look like me are the ones benefiting from it. That is how bad it is. The worst part is that they do not even know their own history. They do not understand what is going on in their community. Isn't that ignorant? Of course, that is ignorant on the highest level. You think you are punishing me? No, you are not. You are punishing yourself. So get it. Wait, I don't know. My brain is just running helter-skelter, but it's fine, One thing I know for sure is not until they sit themselves down, because there is need for them to sit themselves down and tell themselves the truth. Because you cannot operate on lie. When you operate on lie, you get it wrong. That's why each time black people say, when you do not know history, you are bound to repeat it. When you don't know history, trust me, you are going to mess up. You will continue to repeat it. Some will repeat it without even knowing. A lot of white people need to wake up, because they are going through what I am going through, but they are masking it with whiteness. Right? Coming out here on the internet to make some crazy videos, to ask you some silly questions. Do you know how many of them have lost their job within few days of this SNAP benefit being cut off? You know how many of them, they lost their jobs, some lost custody to their children and all that. Because ignorant, to them, they think they are smart, but ignorance is actually bliss. I really do not have a lot to say, because I have said so much. I have said so much already, right? And one thing I will tell you guys is, not until you wake up, sincerely speaking, do not think that each time I say that they need to wake up, that I am joking. I am not joking. These people are sleeping. They are sleeping big time. I am going to save this one for the next video, because the next video is also me calling them out. So see you all in my next video. Bye for now.